Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're discussing why the Emperor took Rogal Dorn to Terra. General spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe. So you have been warned, and with that said, let's just jump straight in. If you were to ask the question of when did the Heresy truly begin, I think the Istvan massacre would arguably be the defining moment. The moment in time there became no turning back, when the fate of the galaxy was forever altered, one way or the other. And while this may be when the battle was truly commenced, the blood of brothers shed, as loyalist faced traitor, for me, I think the steps towards the Heresy began at Ulanor, the height of the Imperium's golden era. Here, after shattering the Orc Empire, the Emperor deemed the time right to begin the next phase of his grand plan, the conquest of the Webway. He announced Horus as War Master, forever altering the dynamic of brotherhood amongst the Primarchs, and he perhaps more importantly announced his own departure, or should I say return, to Terra, taking Rogal with him. Rogal would be the Praetorian of Terra, his task to fortify the Imperial Palace. But the question we're asking today is why? Why was Rogal tasked with returning to Terra, long before any heresy? What was the Emperor's true purpose behind it? It's a conversation and debate we've had a few times over the years, and one we'll no doubt discuss more again in the future as more information comes to light. But what do we know? In truth, as ever with the Emperor, not much. A lot left to speculation. One thing is clear: defense was the priority. You can argue who is the better fortress builder or siege specialist between Dorn and Perturabo, but in choosing Rogal, the Emperor could have complete faith the Imperial Palace would become a bastion of defense the likes the galaxy had never seen. He also, of course, did not return alone. The Imperial Fist Legion in force was to be removed from the Great Crusade to stand garrison. So an entire legion standing in defense of the Sol system. That's a truly formidable force. Considering this, it's no wonder a lot of speculation and theory goes to this being a sign the Emperor foresaw the Heresy, that Rogal was brought back specifically to perform the role he later would throughout the Heresy years, preparing Terra for Horus's assault, and leading the loyalist forces throughout the siege. And of course this is possible. We know the Emperor foresees many possible futures, never knowing in truth which ones may occur or not. If you needed any Primarch to fortify Terra and the Sol system entirely, to garrison it with their legion and lead the defense of the siege, well, you couldn't go wrong with Rogal. Even I love the guy now after his efforts. And despite the tragedy of the grimdark Imperium that would come, you have to say Rogal did technically win, doing his job to absolute perfection. The guy absolutely deserves his props. However, for me, the argument that the Emperor foresaw the Heresy has never felt right. Logically speaking, if the Emperor did indeed foresee a betrayal, and that's why Rogal was brought back, why wouldn't the Emperor simply bring back more than one legion? We're talking about the culmination of everything the Emperor ever worked for, the final stage of his grand plan, mankind's conquering of the Webway. Why would he even risk any of it with just one Primarch and Legion? Surely it'd make sense to be extra cautious. You could argue that only Rogal was chosen for the Emperor's implicit trust in him, so it could only be Rogal. But that doesn't quite work with the 2 Legion question. Yes, Rogal had the specialism, but he didn't alone share the Emperor's implicit trust. Horus Lupercal obviously aside, we know for a fact that Russ and L. Johnson also had the Emperor's implicit trust, no matter what. As of the Siege of Terra, Sanguinius it appears also. And for me, you definitely could argue Ferrus Manus, Vulcan or Corax too. However, implicitly, no matter what speaking, we know the first 3 for definite. If the Emperor truly foresaw a betrayal, with so much on the line, wouldn't he surely have brought one more of those brothers and legions to the Sol system too? And I definitely think the Great Crusade was at a stage now where it could have afforded to lose more than 1 legion. It's definitely worth a debate for me, at least. Another aspect I find a little doubting in the foreseeing of the Heresy regard is why not bring Guilliman? The fortification and garrisoning of Terra wasn't Rogal's only duty during the Heresy. He was appointed Lord Commander and tasked with leading the Imperium's defense. He was responsible and in charge for the entire Imperium's war effort. We know for certain Rogal at least felt his brother Guilliman was better suited for that particular role. Time will show in the aftermath of the Heresy, but I think it's likely it was probably more than just Rogal's opinion too. That it was more a universal acceptance that Guilliman would have been Lord Commander were he there. At least by Malcador and the Emperor. Though I admit that's just speculation given Rogal's comments at this point. Any heresy wouldn't have just been about defending Terra, it would have been about conducting the war, the galactic-wide campaign, the administration, Rabute's known area of expertise. You combine that with Guilliman having the largest legion by far. I mean, come on here. If you foresaw a possible betrayal, a galactic-wide civil war, and you wanted to ensure your grand plan remained intact, you're telling me Rogal Dorn and Rabute wouldn't have been the perfect counter to any threat. Horus had to divert Lorgar and Angron just to keep Guilliman busy. There's of course a few practical arguments you could make. Guilliman wasn't at Ulanor, or without Guilliman the Eastern Fringe and Ultramar would have been left to the mercy of chaos and war. But again, the priority's Terra, and the Emperor could have easily communicated the order, or made Guilliman be present if he wanted to. Maybe a bigger counter could be the Emperor's apparent backing of L. Johnson when the Dark Angels went to take out Guilliman in the Heresy. It didn't play out that way, of course, but the Emperor certainly seemed content with whatever course the Lion felt appropriate. It's one of those great Emperor Malcador conversations. Maybe an argument could be made at this point that the Emperor's trust in Guilliman was still a little up in the air, or at least as not as strong as his trust in Rogal, L. Johnson or Russ. But anyway, overall, all these things to me just kind of add up to the notion that Rogal going to Terra wasn't about the Heresy. That if the Emperor had truly foreseen and expected the Heresy to come, then he surely would have done something more, at least in terms of defending Terra. So if Rogal returning to Terra wasn't about a future heresy, what was it about? Well, I think it's really much more straightforward and simple. The Emperor returned to Terra for the next stage of his grand plan, and quite simply, Rogal was a part of that. The Emperor's Webway project was to be the beginning of a new era for humanity, their severing of a reliance on the warp. As such, Terra was to become, in a way, the gateway for all of this. This meant this already most important world in the Imperium became even more important, more vital, by indescribable degrees. Given this, of course the Emperor needed the heartbeat of all of that to be fortified. It was a plan in secret, but should word escape, of course Terra would face attack. Not from a combination of his own legions, but from the forces of chaos, determined to prevent humanity from accessing the Webway. From the Eldari, for the very same reason. As such, the Webway War needed to be conducted and protected on two fronts. The Emperor's Talons and the Mechanicus led the advance within the Webway, and Rogal Dorn and the Imperial Fists garrisoned the door, the rear. A war fought on two fronts and two planes. For all the theories, for all the speculation, for me it really all boils down to the simplest, most straightforward answer being the right one. That moment of triumph at Ulanor wasn't the Emperor planning for the grim dark future. He wasn't anointing Horus with one hand and preparing for a civil war with the other. It was truly the celebration of the future, of mankind's achievement. Horus Lupercal, the brightest sun, was to lead the remaining Great Crusade, while the Emperor prepared the next stage, the culmination. Rogal and the Imperial Fists were playing their part in that, because he was trusted, and because he had the required talent. He was the right tool. The Imperial Palace wasn't fortified because of war. In many ways, it was to prevent one. To prevent any attempt on the Webway Gate even being possible by the time the Emperor's intention was unveiled. That was the entire reason for the secret, so that by the time Chaos and the Eldari learnt of the Emperor's intentions, Rogal would have fortified the palace to a point that invasion would have been entirely pointless, leaving Terra to operate instead as this glorious, indestructible gateway for humanity, the foundation and bastion of its future. How ironic that it was the same humanity that prevented it all from ever coming to pass. But as always everyone, what do you think? Do you agree with me that the reason behind Rogal's return to Terra is in truth the simplest explanation? He simply was a part of the Emperor's Webway plan. He needed to fortify the door, the gate, that it was his duty to prepare Terra before word ever escaped, thus preventing any jeopardy to the Emperor's plan. Or do you feel that it was more focused on the heresy, that the Emperor did indeed foresee it? If so, why do you feel the Emperor only brought one legion to Terra? Why didn't he bring another? Why not a more suitable Lord Commander, such as Guilliman, or his larger Ultramarine Legion? If the Emperor had implicit trust in Rogal to not be the betrayer, why not have ulterior plans with the few other Primarchs he also trusted no matter what? Why not give instructions to Russ or El Johnson, for example? Or do you feel he did? Again, just another reason for me why Rogal's instructions were for the future of mankind, and not for the Heresy. But as always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.